Her and EU, a European podcast on gender equality. Brought to you by the Martens Centre with Loredana Teodorescu.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this new episode of Her and EU, a podcast on gender equality and women's role in the society. I'm Loredana Teodorescu, and our special guest of today is Katarzyna Pisarska, founder of the European Academy of Diplomacy and co-founder and chair of the Warsaw Security Forum. Katarzyna, you are a social entrepreneur, a civic activist, an academic. You're also chairing several important organizations in the field of foreign policy, security, and diplomacy, and you received many acknowledgements for your leadership accomplishments. So looking back, what have been the ingredients of your success and how being a woman has affected your career?
Thank you so much, Loredana, for, first of all, the invitation. It's such a pleasure to be here with you and discuss this very relevant topic of women leadership in international relations. Let me tell you that I think the most important ingredients I feel has helped me succeed in my professional career is simply one. It's a sense of purpose. I think in any leadership activity, in any activity really, if you have a deep sense of what you're doing, that what you're doing changes something, makes sense, is important for you personally, then any obstacle that you might encounter, and there's of course many during a lifetime, they in time become irrelevant. And for me, my sense of purpose was really related to my country. I was, as a small child, a refugee after the martial law in Poland in 1981. I've ended up with my parents who were doctors in the United States. And I was told as a small child that we'll probably never go back to Poland because it was a communist state. The Iron Curtain was there. It was impossible for them to return. And then, of course, 1989 happened. And within my childhood years, I've seen, the impossible possible. And we came back to Poland at the end of the 1980s with this wonderful feeling that a miracle has happened. Europe has united. The impossible has become possible, but also with the sense of the need to rebuild the country, to open it up to the open markets, to democracy, and of course, make sure that Poland and Central Europe integrates with the West through joining NATO, through joining the European Union. So most of my young years during my studies, I had a very strong sense of purpose, that this was one and a unique historical opportunity. Now, when you ask me whether the fact that I'm a woman made a difference, well, I'm sure it did. But at the beginning, I've tried to see this as an opportunity. It surely, especially when you are in the area of security, of military studies, you are in the minority. Very often you're the only in the room, and that makes you stand out. But it also gives you the feeling that you have to do your best, that you have to prove yourself. And again, I saw this as an opportunity, not an obstacle. I've never felt discriminated in any way when I had direct interactions with people. But when I do have media performances, when I do go live on TV, I have podcasts, I sometimes, look at those horrible comments. And one thing I always notice is that, people tend to focus on, what is she wearing? Oh, why is she smiling like this? Oh, and of course, when you have male experts on the same panel, they would actually focus on what he is saying. So I would never say that it doesn't matter. It does matter. And I think there's a lot of work to do in terms of actually making sure that women have their rightful place at any discussion, at any table.
And speaking of sense of purpose, now you as a Polish analyst, as an activist, as an expert on security, you are devoting many initiatives to Ukraine. You are involved in many dialogues. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? And here again, do you feel that being a woman addressing those issues changes somehow your perspectives?
I think the last 50 plus days were probably the most challenging, but in a way, the most purposeful in my entire career. And this is because I have the opportunity to work with a group of magnificent women from Ukraine who we have evacuated at the beginning of the war, the Russian invasion to Ukraine, from Kiev to Warsaw, who have established with us the International Center for Ukrainian Victory, who have done incredible work on advocacy, from reaching out to US Congress, Secretary Blinken, to all major decision makers here in Europe. And I have to say, I've learned incredibly a lot from these women. And of course, whatever they've been doing in the last 50 days, they've changed their entire career, if you can say that, and began to advocate on behalf of Ukraine, especially in terms of military assistance to Ukraine, humanitarian assistance, but also bringing out the horrible, the showing the horrible atrocities that are done on the Ukrainian people and showing it to the world. And the way they do it is just incredible because of their passion, because of their love for their country, because their understanding of an existential fight that Ukraine is doing.
Indeed, you are doing a great job. However, there are no women, or there are very few of them at the different tables taking decisions, which we know happens very often. So are women really absent, or let's say they are just somehow invisible?
I think this is a very important discussion that every woman leader has to have with other women leaders. It is true, and this is not only the Ukrainian case, is that you have a very big group of talented women, usually going out of universities, entering their professional careers, sometimes deciding to go into politics, into public administration, into security jobs, but somewhere in their late 20s, early 30s, it seems that on top of all these wonderful, powerful women, I mean, their career slows down, while the big important positions, leadership positions, are actually taken by men. And I think there's a lot of different reasons for this. Some would say, of course, barriers that come from stereotypes, from some countries have a very strong male culture of promotion. But I think one of the biggest challenges we see across Europe, from really Sweden to Spain, is that there are systematic challenges which come again from the fact that many women decide to have in their 30s, a family, which is more than expected and wonderful. But then they have to make choices. And these choices usually are, if I want to have a child, a second child, a third child, then of course I can take that promotion. Of course, I can take that job, or sometimes even if I'm offered, I do realize how time-consuming that would be, and what does that mean for my kids. And this is, probably a dilemma which we have been facing for a very long time. But we see that actually there are countries who are dealing with this dilemma much better than others. And I'm looking here specifically on Scandinavian countries, where a lot of the working culture actually is tuned to the needs of women in such a way that it expects also male to step up to be full-time parents, full-time fathers. It does give, specific preference for women who have children, gives them more time to complete some of their stages of career. So I think the biggest challenge I've seen over the years, and something I've tried to really advocate for with women from all around Europe and beyond, is to really push these systematic changes in our countries. But at the end of the day, we also have to realize that, of course, women can have it all, but they can't have it at the same time. That for women, pacing a career is much more important, and to understand that you have certain times of your life which you devote more time for your family and then more time for your career, and this pacing is truly critical.
What can we do to better support and facilitate women leadership and to facilitate this change of mindset? I have in mind the different programs you initiated and developed, for instance, devoted to the younger generation, such as the Academy of Young Diplomats. So what kind of programs or initiatives are, in your opinion, the most successful to shape, to sharpen, to inspire a new generation committed to a better and equal world?
Well, in all the programs that we run at the European Academy of Diplomacy, especially longer programs, we do try to have a component that is called women leadership. And we actually do this model for both male and female participants of our programs. And what we're trying to do during these models, which are sometimes a very intimate experience, because we talk about personal experience of trying to lead as a woman, trying to lead as a male, what kind of barriers, what kind of challenges we both face. But what we try to do is to encourage a discussion about where the problems are. And I always find, and we've been doing this for almost 15 years, that the young generation is extremely appreciative of opening these issues to a wide discussion. On the one side, it opens the minds, especially of the male participants. They often don't think about the challenges that women face while entering leadership positions. But then it also is extremely helpful for women to kind of realize early in the process, so while they're still in their 20s, what kind of challenges they might face and what kind of help and support they should be receiving. And there's a few things that I always recommend for our programs. First and foremost is mentoring. I think having a support group of not only family, friends, but also professional support group of women, but also men who have walked different paths, career paths, and are there to give you advice, to kind of, give you a sense of maybe direction or understanding of the potential challenges you might face in the future, and in a way protecting you from some of the mistakes you might or frustrations you might have. I think mentoring is an extremely strong tool. But apart from mentoring tools, any women leadership program, any discussion, again, with men leaders also, make them realize, that they also have to be more proactive, not only as bosses seeking out talent among women, but also as fathers supporting their wives in their careers, and also taking full responsibility for family in terms of upbringing of children, and not only the financial responsibility. So all this, I think that the young generation is extremely open to, and some of these things are much more obvious than they were for my generation. But last, I would say, at the end of the day, there is a need for a systematic change that promotes actually the kind of working environment that is open to families, that is open to self-development, that is more flexible. And this will only come if there's enough of self-aware citizens, especially the young generation, which is going to demand this. And again, this is already happening.
So we discussed obstacles, we discussed challenges, and also possible initiatives to overcome them. Can you briefly tell us how having more women shaping our foreign and security policies could make the difference? So what is the added value in a very few words?
Well, first and foremost, the most obvious thing is most, or if not all, areas of policy, of security, of economy are areas that affect women's lives. So if they affect women's lives, just like men sit at the table to make decisions in these areas, women should also be there, because it simply is a decision about their lives. And of course, the fact that you have more women, especially in politics, means that there's more focus on issues such as education, healthcare, children's issues, very often, in the past seen as not that relevant to policy making, but also this perspective of women leaders changes the way we actually produce policies in this area. With no doubt, there's different leaders. There's a lot of different leadership styles. I would never say that women have a different leadership style than men. It's really all about character. But surely studies again and again show that women leaders tend to be more empathic. They tend to be more team focused. They tend to be less focused on my ego. So I think this ability of women to have extended emotional intelligence, especially empathy, but also self-awareness, self-regulation, all this really adds to leadership of any institution. And last but not least, I think I've seen a very interesting study showing that especially the corporation perform much better if there are women on the boards. And they've done in-depth studies about this. And it turns out that the leadership of such corporations is less willing to take dramatic risks if there are women on boards. So there's multiple reasons. But again, I would say the most important is all the issues in politics and economy are related to women's life. And just like men have a say about them, women also should have a say in decision-making that affects all women in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for highlighting it very, very well. Let me conclude with a final personal question. So today you are inspiring, you are also mentoring many women and girls. But is there a person who inspired you throughout your life?
I might surprise you, but one person who inspires me every time is my husband. We've been together 23 years, I think, and he has always, been the greatest cheerleader I have ever had. And we have both created the many institutions you've mentioned, the European Academy of Diplomacy, the Pulaski Foundation, the Warsaw Security Forum. All of these institutions, in a way, were his ideas, but he had never any problem with me taking leadership. On the contrary, he was the one who saw my potential and said, well, you should be doing this. You should be at the table. You should be making these decisions, even when I doubted myself. So I think it's very important to have in your life, both, of course, female and male cheerleaders. But I think a male's perspective it tends to be extremely rational and pragmatic in terms of understanding that, you have to be out there. Yes, you cannot just be answering your emails and thinking that if you did your to-do list, you're good as a leader, but really being out there, making the difficult decisions, standing up for yourself, speaking with a clear voice. And we often, as women, have a problem with that. And I think male leaders have a big role to play, and men have a big role to play. Our fathers, our partners, our male friends, to encourage women to stand up, to have influence on the decisions that are being made in any field.
Katarzyna, thank you so much for your time, for your words, and thank you to the Martens Center for making this podcast possible. Thank you all for listening, and stay tuned for the next episode.
That was today's episode of Her and EU. Subscribe to our podcast for more.